All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Jamie. I think we have a small group today. I'm going to actually open it up for I'll allow some time today for some dialogue if you're interested in that. So if you have any questions as we're going along, just jot them down and maybe we'll have an opportunity to just chat a little bit. For now, I'm going to mute everyone. Everyone's muted. And we'll go ahead and get started. So, wow, week 2, cultivating resilience and steadiness during these really anxious times. If you remember, during our first class session, I identified what are called the 5 C's of resilient coping. We talked about calm and what that means in terms of resiliency. We talked about clarity and how stress can affect our cognitive abilities. Yet when we're really resilient, we are able to maintain a sense of focus. We're able to bring ourselves out of high states of mental fog. We're able to make decisions, especially in the midst of really stressful times when we might have to make decisions very abruptly and very quickly. And then connection is a really important aspect of what it means to be resilient. And that really refers to the degree to which your closest, most important relationships feel really strong and supportive to you during difficult times. But I wanted to stop us for a couple of sessions and really focus on the notion of connection so that we can start contemplating how it is that we make or create a situation where our relationships feel as if they are resilient. Remembering that the way that stress impacts me personally, individually, inevitably will spill over into my relationship. So the last 2 classes, we talked about the way in which the stress response starts to show up in your relationships. You might remember that fight will show up. There are ways in which during states of high stress and tension, unpredictability, we actually start to flee. We will leave our relationships, even though we might still be sitting across the table from the person that we love or living all together 24/7 during the last 3 weeks or so. We find ways to leave, and then we can also find ways to freeze. So one of the things I introduced to you last time was this notion of the way in which it's really important that we are highly conscious and mindful of how we're communicating with each other during episodes of high stress. And I introduced the notion of the 4 deadly horsemen as a way of asking us each to think about or to consider the degree to which these styles of communication, these forms of expression are present in our relationships and even in our family lives. It's completely normal for these things to be present when we are in a stressful situation, especially all together. They become very corrosive and disruptive and potentially destructive when they are not tended to. And then they become part of our dynamic. And then it becomes very normal for us to communicate in ways that are really critical, for us to live every day inside the lives of our families or close relationships very defensive, that contempt might even be present. And with all of this may have led to this state of stonewalling. So I want to bring the slides back up, talk just a little bit, and then take you right into a practice. This is just going to take me a minute because I'm going to need to fast forward. Oh, let me see. Let me see if this will take me right to where I need to be. All right, here were our 4 deadly horsemen of the relational apocalypse. Again, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling. You know, the good news is that there are antidotes, and I really if you're interested in this stuff, I really recommend that you go to the Gottman Institute's website. You can read extensively about the four horsemen, as well as their antidotes. Criticism, now more than ever, sprinkle that into the way in which you're talking to each other, the way in which you're being with each other, the praise, the affirmation, the gratitude, the appreciation. Defensiveness, make a decision right here and right now that even when this is really hard, my commitment in this relationship, in this family, is to remain committed to our connection. Even use that as a mantra. I am committed to our connection. I am committed to our connection. So that this front, I opened last time with that Brene Brown sentiment about having a really strong back and a really soft and open front. I want to remain open rather than defensive or defended. Be uncompromising about contempt. When you hear it in the voices of your children, when you hear it amongst siblings, when you hear it, when you feel it, when you're thinking in contemptuous ways about the people that matter most to you, catch yourself. Wait a minute. I made a commitment to be uncompromising about contempt being present in our lives, and really hold that close to you, hold that commitment very, very close. Because therapeutically speaking, this is when a therapist might say, the couple is in trouble and really needs intervention when contempt becomes part of the dynamic. I did say that yes, it is possible for two very conscious, committed people to back out of these dynamics if they're present, if they're aware, and if they are willing to do the work. But once contempt starts to settle in and it becomes very pervasive, it becomes very, very difficult to walk yourself back into a state of healing or a state where the dynamic is really healthy and supportive, not just for the partnership, the couple, but for the rest of the family. Always remembering, and this is something that I mentioned in our first session, calm is contagious. So is anxiety. So is panic. It is absolutely contagious. We actually have neurologically what are called mirror neurons. You may have noticed even within yourself the power and the presence of mirror neurons, especially when you're talking with someone and you're both physically present. You will often see that two people will begin to mirror each other's nonverbals. If one person brings her hand to her chin, right? If you and I are in conversation and I bring my hand to my chin, I might notice that you do the same. But this is even more true energetically speaking. Energy will match energy. This is one of the reasons why for people who are very aware of the energy that they bring into a situation, into a room, they're very aware, might notice that when they're in the presence of someone who's operating at a much lower energy level, like the vibe is really low, or the vibe is really toxic, or the vibe is really anxious or troubled, we might find ourselves sliding down into that to meet that. And so we have to be very aware. And really, this is what it means to be mindful. Like, wow, I don't want to go there. Great example of this. I remember this happening with my kids when my daughter was around 10 years old and really starting to trigger me. Our kids have us figured out. They are paying attention. They're paying attention to who we are, and they're paying attention to what our buttons are, and they know how to push them. But I remember having episodes with her when I was highly triggered, and I had the realization that I just became a 10-year-old in the interaction. even as an energetically sensitive person and as someone who understands that energy will meet energy, I recognize and I can acknowledge that I've had moments, many more than I wish to admit to, where I went straight down to her level. And then you have two 10-year-olds trying to battle it out or trying to resolve a problem or a conflict, and it doesn't go very well. Similarly, you may also have had experiences where you know that the high level at which you were vibrating, the degree of emotional intelligence that you brought to a conflict or a negotiation, the way that you entered a room where there was going to be potential conflict, yet you came in very calm. You can almost see it before you even open your mouth. You can almost see the impact that your energy has in the room on the interaction, and you can see the person you're dealing with rising to meet your energy. So the energy of contempt is a guttural energy. It's a very low energy, and when it's present, and I know that you all know what I'm talking about, because I'm certain that everyone here has had the experience of feeling contempt. Contempt is easier to feel than it is to explain, but you know when you're feeling it. And it doesn't feel good. And it feels very primitive. So uncompromising about that. And then stonewalling, making a decision unless there are grounds for doing so, but making the decision that as hard as it gets, we don't leave. No one leaves. And remember, no one leaves doesn't just mean, physically leaving, but even when it's hard, I'm going to stay present. I'm not going to flee by going into that numb, vacant state, or that state where I'm pretending that everything is fine. Okay, so there are ways of combating, and trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you can know about this stuff. And you don't need to research it further. This is all you really do need to know. But if you're interested in storm-proofing your relationships and in being with each other in ways and communicating with each other in ways that you're always building your relational musculature, even during the good times, so that when the winds and the rains and the storms and the pandemic arrives, you know that you're on stable ground. One of the things that I would like for you to think about, and this is a slide that I just added today, is to think about the degree to which the horsemen reside within yourself and your relationship to you. In communication studies, there is a body of literature that addresses what is called intrapersonal communication. It always struck me as strange, even as a very young undergraduate student, that intrapersonal communication was just one chapter in your book on communication studies. I found this to be so strange because I believed that my relationship with me is going to shape and impact my relationship with everyone. Like, it starts with me. And I just felt like there should be a whole book on intrapersonal. There should be whole courses on intrapersonal communication, but there's just so little. But when we think about the horsemen, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, we can also think about these things in terms of the way in which we talk to ourselves about ourselves and our circumstances, the way that we treat ourselves or fail to treat ourselves. I'll tell you a little bit later on why this came to mind and why I started to make this connection. But I really think it's valuable to start thinking about this within the framework of self-compassion. I took a special training this summer on the mindfulness of self-compassion, and I really took the training because I wanted to add it to my repertoire of teachings. And I was probably in the training for the first 20 minutes, and I had the realization that I was taking this for me, that I really needed this content. And it was a very, very profound course for me, because it allowed me to, and it allowed others to look very, very deeply at our intrapersonal process. And part of your intrapersonal process is your relationship to you. And this understanding that so many of us, especially those of us who show up for classes like this, so many of us are phenomenal and masterful at carrying the suffering of others and caring for others. In other words, our capacity for compassion is very high. It's not something we have to work really hard at. And yet, it's very perplexing that our capacity for self-compassion is very difficult. There were many people in the course who admitted on the first day that they were exactly where I was. Oh, I'm taking this because I'm a therapist, or I'm taking this because I'm a coach, or I'm taking this because I'm a meditation teacher and I want to be able to teach this. I want to be able to give this. But I'm very reluctant to take this information in and to use it for myself. This sense that, how dare I? Or I don't deserve this, or wow, if I take this content in and I start practicing self-compassion, I'm going to have to really look at all the ways in which I've broken my own heart, all the ways in which I've abandoned myself, all the ways in which I've been so self-critical, so self-judgmental, all of the ways that I go to battle within myself all the time. So I'm not only in a defensive state with others, I'm in a defensive state with myself. Because sometimes our inner chatter isn't just monologue, sometimes it's dialogue. You may have noticed, you can check in with yourself periodically and ask yourself, wow, is what's happening in here in terms of that chatter? Is it just a monologue? Or is it a dialogue? Are you arguing with yourself? And the very curious question to ask is, who's that other voice? There's me, and then there's this other, who am I fighting with? What is this internal struggle? What are the two forces here that are at work? In what ways do I talk to myself? Am I thinking in ways about myself? Am I perceiving myself? Am I believing things about myself that are contemptuous, where there is that energy of contempt? In what ways have I stonewalled against myself so that I don't have to even look at what's there? So I invite you, in addition to thinking about the presence of these qualities inside of your relationships, do they exist inside of yourself? And how important that might be. How important it is to even think about relationship within yourself. How do I relate to me? And what is the nature and quality of that relationship? And again, using the same antidotes. When was the last time I really affirmed myself? When was the last time I ever praised myself, had gratitude for myself? When was the last time I was appreciative of myself? Am I open to, am I devoted to remaining committed to having a connection to me? Will I be uncompromising about contempt being present in the way I think about, and talk within myself? Can I make the commitment to myself that I will never leave myself, that I will not abandon myself? This is a really powerful way of thinking about the ways in which the four horsemen might be present within you, not just your relationship. And this is valuable in terms of resiliency, because I will tell you that when criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling are part of your interpersonal dynamic, it's exhausting. This is why we want to leave relationships where this is going on. It's exhausting, and it is actually not natural to us as human beings to live like that. It is equally exhausting if in your relationship to you, it is fraught with the presence of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So these are important things to consider, because again, this is all about cultivating resiliency, not just personally, but also relationally. And that's not going to happen, or we're not going to do it well, when we are exhausted by dynamics that we're living in and participating in our relationships, and similarly exhausted by these dynamics if they exist within us. So check in. You know, a really great mindfulness minute, not even a minute, a moment, is throughout the day, just stop and say, what am I saying to myself right now? And as Kristen Neff would say, and she really sort of put this notion of self-compassion on our map, would I ever talk to a friend that way? Would I talk to my child that way? Would I talk to someone I love in the way that I'm talking to myself? If we were all present in one room, because I often will share this when I'm leading larger trainings, I say that if I could put a loudspeaker on the crown of everyone's head and broadcast at high volume what you were all saying to yourself simultaneously, the room would be deemed insane. There's a lot of insanity in what's happening up here, not just in me, but in all of us collectively. So one way to assess, wow, what is the quality of my relationship to myself, is to really look at my self-talk. How do I talk to myself? What is that inner monologue, inner dialogue saying? If I could broadcast it and transcribe it, and then at the end of the day, read it, everything I said to myself, would I read it and feel, wow, this is really uplifting? Or would I read it and say, this is really tragic? How do the horsemen reside in your self-perception, how you view yourself, what you believe about yourself, and how you care about yourself? So an assessment of my relationship to me is to look at self-talk, self-perception, the things I believe to be true about me, and the ways in which I care for myself or fail to care for myself. So, and are those four qualities present? You might remember last Wednesday, I talked about our relationships as a house, how we would always pay attention to the foundation we built it on. I used the imagery of the pillars, the 4 pillars. What 4 pillars hold it up? I mentioned that when I officiate weddings, that one of the things I try to get to or get at with the couples I work with is a sense of what are the 4 qualities that are holding up this home that you call your relationship. And we can really extend that analogy, because when we think about the word home, and when we think about the kinds of physical homes that we create and the kind of time and attention that we put into the creation of our homes, and when we think about the function of our homes, right? Yes, our homes, we want to be places of shelter, dwellings of shelter, but we also want them to be places where we can grow. We want them to be places where we can be. We want them to be places where we can expand. We want them to be places that feel safe enough so that we could actually rest and rejuvenate. Relationships are the same way. I want to know that, wow, if I'm making a commitment to you, I want to know that our relationship is this place where I can rest, where I can kick back, where I can be, where I can grow and evolve, that it's safe. So this is why really thinking about what are our 4 pillars, like what holds us up as a couple, as a family. And I identified the 4 pillars that are really important to me. And we talked about these: trust, respect, authenticity, and the genuine caring. So what would it mean if you also started to think about the pillars of the relationship between you and you, your relationship to yourself? I looked at this slide last night and I thought, wow, this is applicable to my own life, how critically important it is for me to self-trust, self-respect, authenticity, as often as possible, being very, very real with myself about who I am, and very aware of when I'm being inauthentic, and genuine care. What sorts of loving, caring gestures do I provide for myself? So I invite you to think about all of this content, especially the presence of the horsemen and the antidotes, not only in your relationships with others, but in your relationship to yourself. And not only thinking about what are the pillars that support the home of our family relationship, the home of our romantic partnership, but also my relationship with me. And I think that this is important work and important things to think about. Imagine how exhausting it would be and the kind of toll it would take on you if you lived in a chronic way where you did not trust yourself. If I couldn't trust myself, I would live on pins and needles all day long, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Imagine how exhausting it would be to not respect myself, to live in inauthentic ways, to not allow myself genuine care. We can look at the lives of other people we know who have lived in ways that were not true to who they are because of fear, sort of worrying about what others might think or feel, really stuck and unable to express in the world who they are. And I've always thought that is the definition of hell on earth. And the toll that that takes. Sometimes the toll is so great that one will take his or her own life. So we might think about authenticity at an even higher level, and maybe thinking about it in terms of alignment. Am I able to live every day fully aligned with the truth of who I am? Important questions. I opened last time with this notion that Brene Brown brings forward in her book, Braving the Wildness. She talks about the strong back, the soft front, and she also talks about the wild heart. The wild heart is the natural result or consequence of having a strong back and a soft front. The wild heart can live, the wild heart can be, the wild heart can express, the wild heart can explore. The wild heart is not stonewalled. The wild heart is not fortressed. The wild heart is free. It's freedom. So how do we get there? I want to share with you a practice that is not only a practice that you can use as a mindful meditation practice, but a practice that you can use in your dynamic, not only with others, but within and inside yourself. The practice is known as the 4 mantras, and it comes from the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's a very beautiful practice, but I want to preface it with a couple of thoughts, and we'll use these thoughts as little mini micro meditations of sorts. And to do that, let's go back to the notion of the strong back, the soft front, and the wild heart. Roshi Joan Halifax writes, all too often, our so-called strength comes from fear and not love. Instead of having a strong back, many of us have a defended front, which is actually shielding a weak spine. In other words, we walk around brittle and defensive, trying to conceal our lack of confidence, our lack of self-trust, our lack of self-respect. So sometimes we walk around brittle, defensive, and defended, hard front, because we're shielding a weak spine, a weak back, because of lack of confidence, lack of self-trust, lack of self-esteem. But here's the possibility, and these words come from Maya Angelou. And if you know Maya Angelou's story, it would make sense that she would have struggled extensively with self-confidence and self-esteem. And so much of her work lives on as a wellspring of a call into our own strength, our own confidence, our own deserving as human beings to love ourselves. So I just want you to listen to this phrase. She writes, I belong to myself. I'm very proud of that. I am very concerned about how I look at Maya, because I like Maya very much. I like Maya very much. I love her, I care for and about her. I'd like for you to close your eyes, and I'm going to read that again. But this time, in the space where we might use the word Maya, because she's writing about herself, I want you to bring your own name into that space. I belong to myself. I'm very proud of that. I am very concerned about how I look at, in my case, Christine. Use your own name. I am very concerned about how I look at because I like myself very much. I love, I care for, and I care about myself. Being myself, my own person, brave enough to go my own way alone if necessary, to stand up for myself and what I believe in without fear, requires self-respect and love. But this level of self-care is not about treats like bubble baths or chocolate or pedicures, though all of those are quite nice. This level of self-care, self-love, self-respect is about caring for the soul that lives inside of this skin suit and walking this earth, learning and remembering how to love myself in all circumstances. Unconditional, radical love and forgiveness starts with me. And this is the foundation of all belonging. This is the foundation of connecting with others. So whenever you're ready, open your eyes. And we'll just unpack that a little bit. And I wanted you to feel and sense deeply inside of yourself what it meant to say, I belong to myself. I'm proud of that. Be very concerned about how you look at you. She writes, I'm very concerned about how I look at Maya. I'm very concerned with how I look at Christine. I ought to be, because I like her very much. And there's a difference between liking and loving. We might have people in our life that we just love so much, but we might not necessarily like them, But liking is important. And we want to think about the notion of like for ourselves as well, as being different from loving, but being necessary to loving. Being myself, being brave enough to move forward and to go my own way alone and to stand up for what I believe in without fear of retribution, without fear of punishment, without fear of being silenced, is so critical and requires enormous self-respect and self-love. And this kind of self-care, respect, and love, she writes, is not about bubble baths and chocolates and frequent pedicures, but that can be part of it. but it's about learning how to care for the soul that lives inside of this skin suit, this very temporary body. Learning how to care for that soul that lives here. And remembering how to love that soul in all circumstances. And that this kind of radical self-love and forgiveness, and I add the word mercy. I think that the word mercy is really powerful as we apply it to ourselves. When you think about mercy, ask yourself, what does the word conjure for me? I remember being very young, and the Sisters of Mercy actually lived in a convent very, very close to where I'm sitting right now, when there were active nuns living in convents. And I found them to be so mysterious. I was very intrigued by the way that they lived. I was very intrigued by the way that they gave. They were representations for me of mercy. And in the last year or so, that word mercy has become very important to me as related to me. Can we be merciful with ourselves? And it's an important word as we connect it to forgiveness. So this kind of radical self-love, radical self-forgiveness, radical mercy toward the self is what she writes. It is the beginning of all belonging, meaning it is the beginning of the foundation of all connection that is going to be really strong in its foundation and deeply, deeply valuable and meaningful for you as you move through life. When we think about what matters most, we know this intuitively. We don't necessarily live it, but we know this intuitively. But at the end of our lives, if we are conscious, what will matter most is the relationships that we forged along the way. And so consciously, intentionally building them and sustaining them and repairing them when necessary is really important. It's really important. In Bonnie War's book, when she writes about the 5 top regrets of the dying, it's either regret number 2 or regret number 3 is, I regret that I did not spend more time fostering my relationships with those people in my life that I love. And that comes out of her work in palliative care and interviewing patients that she worked with who were dying conscious and were able to talk with her. In other words, she studied what she called their deathbed narratives. And I believe that those findings are true. But I don't want to get to the end of my life, as I'm sure you don't want to get to the end of your life, with regrets about, having been unconscious to your relationship to others and yourself. So one of the ways that we can really develop that soft front is through the 4 mantras. I want you to take them in, and we'll begin, however, by taking them in reference to people in your life that you love, and then we'll turn them on to the self. And again, this is from the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. You just see that picture and feel at peace. The 4 mantras he writes about very extensively in his book. It's probably one of my favorite books on the planet, called The Art of Communicating. And that shouldn't surprise anyone here. It's a really important book for me. He also did a very, very beautiful Super Soul interview with Oprah. If you Google Thich Nhat Hanh, the 4 mantras, Super Soul, you can watch that interview, and he talks about and he explains the 4 mantras in his own words, which is really, really beautiful to listen to. But I just want to read you a passage from his book. He writes, When you love someone, you have to be truly present for him or her. A 10-year-old boy I know was asked by his father what he wanted for his birthday, and the child didn't know how to answer. His father was quite wealthy and could afford to buy the boy almost anything the boy might want. But the boy could only say, "Daddy, I want you." His father was so busy and had no time for his wife or his children. To demonstrate love, we have to make ourselves available. If this father could only learn to breathe in and out consciously and to be present for his son and to say, "My son, I am really here for you." The greatest gift we can make to others is our true presence. When you are concentrated in your mind and your body, you produce pure presence. When you can say in your words, in your energy, in your body, "Darling, I am here for you." And I love that he uses the word darling. And you can use any word you want, but he uses the word, that's the first mantra, "Darling, I am here for you." If you can say this and you are truly present, he writes, this will produce a miracle because you become real in that moment. And the other person is real for you in that moment. And life is real for you in that moment. And this can only bring happiness, he writes, to you and to the other person. I get so excited when I hear this mantra. It's so beautiful. "Darling, I am here for you," because it almost feels shocking when we're in the presence of another human being and they're so locked in, and I am so locked in. There is only happiness can be there, even when we're in the midst of a pandemic. Because in that moment, I am real, you are real, this moment is real. And there's something that is tremendously amazing for you, right? When I can give you the gift of my presence, when I know I'm not playing at this, I am 100% present in this interaction. I am here for you. Darling, beloved, whatever the person's name, I am here for you. You yourself find respite and calm and sanctuary in that. It literally calms. You cannot say that and be in a state of stress or have the central nervous system highly aroused. So that's the first mantra, "Darling, I am here for you." The second mantra, "Darling, I know that you are there, and I am very happy." He writes, this is the second mantra. "When I look at the moon, I breathe in and out deeply and I say, 'Full moon, I know you are there, and I am very happy.' I do the same with the morning star. Last spring in Korea, while walking mindfully among the magnolia trees, I looked at the magnolia flowers and I said, 'I know you are there, and I am very happy.' To be very present and to know that the other is there is also a miracle. When you contemplate a sunset, if you are truly there, you will recognize it and you will appreciate it deeply. Looking at the sunset, you will feel very happy. Whenever you are really there, you are able to recognize and appreciate the presence of the other person. The full moon, the North Star, the magnolia flowers, or the person you love the most. So, darling, I am here. Darling, I know that you are there, and it makes me happy. Is I am connected to your presence. I'm awake. I'm noticing. I'm noticing you much like I would notice the morning star or the full moon or the sunset or the magnolia flower. And it can be the most ordinary moment. It can be mother watching her child bring his cup of milk to his lips and like, wow, I know you're there. I'm like taking this in and this is amazing. So it's bringing the same sort of wonder into our daily lives with other people that we might experience when we can look at expressions of nature that really capture our attention. My presence is a gift. Your presence is a gift. And when we can both be present, the relationship is experienced as such a gift. I mean, we can really come into a state of awe and reverence about it. Third mantra, darling, I know that you suffer, and this is why I'm here for you. When you are mindful, when you are present, you will notice when those you love are suffering. I notice your suffering, and I want you to know that I am here for you. The fact that you are acknowledging that and that you're saying, I'm also here for you, will begin to diminish their suffering. Empathy, true empathy is, hey, I see that you're suffering or struggling or you're anxious or you're angry or whatever it is. I see it. And I want you to know that I'm right here. That's it. I zipped my lips. I don't try to fix it, change it, make it different, make it go away, resolve it, diminish it. I am here. I'm in front of you, beside you, on the phone, whatever it is, in Zoom. But I'm so present. I see the energy of your suffering. I acknowledge that, and I want you to know I'm here. Fourth mantra, probably the hardest one. Darling, I suffer. Please help me. Why is the fourth mantra the most difficult mantra? Because it is often really difficult for us to say to the people we love, hey, I'm having a hard time here. Please help me. My heart is heavy, or I'm grieving, or I'm really scared. Please help me. It's also very difficult for many of us to say to the person we love, especially if they've hurt us, hey, I'm suffering right now. What you said hurt. It's caused me suffering. Please help. When I can say that to you, I then can invite you into the way that I'm suffering, and together we can resolve the hurt. So those are the four mantras. They're very, very powerful. And there's no way that I could ever do them justice. But they are part of a style of communicating, a way of relating. They can become a part of your vocabulary in your relationship. If you're partnered with someone that you feel would be open to working with the four mantras, they don't have to be spoken. They can be energetically present. So we're going to spend the last 5 minutes just in a very short practice. And in this practice, I'm just going to slowly read each of the 4 mantras. Allow your awareness to focus on the words and what they evoke for you. And if you're interested in the self-compassion piece, you might also think about how the 4 mantras might work in your relationship with you. Okay? So I want to invite you to come into a comfortable seat, or if you'd like to, you can lie down. As always, the invitation is to close your eyes or to keep them open, but your gaze very soft, almost dreamlike. And the first thing I'd like for you to do is to bring your awareness to that very strong back. And then to guide your awareness to the center of the chest. And to just feel the softening of your own heart. That if there's any defensiveness there, anything that feels restricted, constricted, just allow it to soften. Taking in not just the words of the 4 mantras, but the beautiful energy that they convey. Darling, I am here for you. Darling, I know you are there, and I'm very happy. Darling, I know you suffer. And that is why I am here for you. Darling, I'm suffering. Please help me. Trust that you have a good and compassionate nature. You are part of the universe. You are made of stars. When you look at your loved one, you see that your loved one is also made of stars and carries the whole of eternity inside. Looking in this way at your beloved and yourself, you naturally feel reverence and honor. Whenever you're ready, but only when you're ready, open your eyes, come back to the space. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. Jen will be here with the practice. And then on Friday, we'll come back for our second Friday featured interview. Stay safe, stay well. See you soon.